Welcome back, investor, to another episode of Passive Income Adventures, where we talk about all of the adventures you can have if you have enough passive income. So today we have Brian Seidensticker with us today. He is with taxsaleresources.com, and I don't know anything about tax sales for real
Yeah.
estate. I looked into it a couple of times when I was looking for my own kind of real estate business that I was building, and some people suggested maybe you should get into this. It would just I just kind of ended up getting led in different directions. So one of the things I do on the show, selfishly, is interview people that I want to talk to, that I want to ask a lot of questions to, and then you get to listen in on those conversations to figure out how we're making income, how we're making passive income, and some of the fun adventures that we're doing, whether it's a bucket list or giving back or running a business, whatever it is. We just are here to help you figure out how to pay for it. So today, Brian's going to talk to us about a couple of different groups of people who might be interested in what he's doing. So most of the people who listen to the show are evenly split between Gen X, like 45 to 55, looking to retire early. Some of you are high income. Some of you are looking to retire from corporate, but you need to retire to a business or something like that first before you can completely step away from active income. Not that you ever completely step away from it, but like for a bulk of your income, you're still looking to make active income through some sort of a business or a side hustle. And then we've got the younger crowd, the Gen Z, as a big listener, about half of our listeners who are maybe looking to get something started as a main hustle, or even looking to get invested earlier. It's almost like you say to me, like, gee, what should I have done younger? Like, what advice would you give me if you'd started this before? So Brian's here to walk us through all of those scenarios, whether you have more time or more money, and you're looking to either retire as just a limited partner, putting money in and letting your money work for you. That's true passive income, or you're looking to get some sort of a business or a side hustle. Brian can walk us through the entire process, how he can serve all of those different demographics. So just kind of listen in, which one applies to you. And even if you decide that you want to be like a limited partner, a money partner in this, the more you learn about what you're investing in, the less risk you're going to take and the better you get at asking questions when you're doing that due diligence. And so it's just a great conversation to learn about this type of investing, whether you want to do it yourself or you want to invest with somebody who is doing it. So let's get right to it and say hello to Brian. Hey, Brian, thanks for joining
Sure.
us today.
I am up. Yeah, thanks for having me. Hey, ra-
It, it's
random. Oh, sorry.
yeah, I would love to hear a little bit more about how you got started in this. Like some we usually divide the show up into like a past, present, future. Like where were you? What led you up to what you're doing right now? And then we'll get into the end a little bit more about like your own future plans, your own passive income adventures that you're planning. So I always make a joke like your little superhero origin story. So just let us know about Brian and bring us up to the present day.
Sure. Yeah. And I guess the random thought I had, it's totally unrelated, and then we'll circle back on this. And I don't want to
Yeah.
get too far down this rabbit hole, or I'll try not to. But you talking about Gen Zers and their kind of mindset, and I had a bit of an epiphany of maybe Gen Zers have bought into or probably accepting some of the reality of maybe Social Security isn't going to be the solution by the time they get to that age. And and it's one of those that each generation kind of listens to the generation before to some degree. They may not seem like it until they're 25, 30 years old, but I don't know, this is kind of an epiphany I had of maybe they're being a little more proactive and being, active and doing something about it before they are 30, 40, 50, and saying, okay, I'm toward the end. What do I do to supplement that Social Security? They're more of like, hey, that might not be there. I got to do something about this earlier to ensure that I'm still okay, which is very cool. I know it's one of those, you know, my generation's one where I didn't necessarily take that into account till I was in my mid 30s, right? And if I had made some different decisions 15 years prior, right, things would have be, I can't complain, right? But things would be even better, right? And so I guess kudos to those that are actively pursuing that. So anyway, just a random thought. Sorry, I wanted to digress there a little bit, Emma. But back to I guess my journey, right? It's kind of I'm obviously biased, but I find it somewhat interesting. And I had zero, I would say, aspirations of being in the tax sales space, really, and probably like most of the listeners had no idea it even existed. I started as a aerospace engineer out of college, and did what I considered a dream job, working on missile defense programs. But definitely had this kind of itch of it doesn't, wasn't, I didn't feel like I was accomplishing enough on a daily basis, is really long story short. And so I knew early enough to do something different or try a side hustle, which for me was was flipping properties. And this was in 2006, 2007, 2008 timeframe. And we were doing this in my hometown. I grew up in Montana. Ended up getting upside down in a property due to the housing crisis, right? As I've heard, many people have similar stories. Fortunately, I wasn't doing enough of them to where it was, a huge detrimental impact. It was more of a bump along the way, but that being upside down did introduce me to the advent of what tax sales are. And I also had a recent epiphany, really talking to some other folks on other podcasts of I probably never would have thought twice about it if it were in any other state other than Montana, right? And the reason behind that is Montana has some odd statutes where every potential investor has to send you a certified letter. And so if I'd gotten a notice from the county, hey, might have a tax lien on your property, got one notice, it's no different than any other, county bill, et cetera, would have taken care of it like we did, but would have never thought twice about it. But the fact that I got these, 30 or 40 certified letters from all these different investors is really what caused me to go, what the heck is this tax lien thing all about? Like, why am I getting notices from groups that I've never even heard of? None of them are official county, right? And so that's what, set me down the path of reading a book about tax sales and then realizing, wow, there's at the time, I didn't know how big, but, a $9-10 billion annual industry of buying and making a decent return that most people seem to not even know about. That's really the origin of, how I got thrust into, the tax sales space. Now really, it shifted from buying properties to, I say, raise friends and family money. I can't even say I'd call it a fund, but a little bit of money to buy tax liens. Now that I learned about this cool new investment opportunity. And I learned really early on that I do not have the temperament to watch the stock market do
Yeah.
its impressive thing. And so I was just looking for something else that I had a little more control over. And, earning, 9-10% buying tax liens in Montana wasn't a bad deal. So that's what started me down the path, was buying these tax liens. And really, I was at a conference, this is in 2008, 2009, at a conference, and a friend had suggested, this tool that I was showing them that we use for internal purposes, just tracking when and where these sales are taking place, right? What properties are in these sales, right? What opportunities are available. Like, there wasn't a resource on a nationwide scale that was available. And I was showing it this friend, and he goes, you know what, you should make that available to the public. You might be able to cover some of your overhead. And so, at the time I was like, okay, sure. We'll make it, an online SaaS service. We called it taxliendatabase.com. And that's really what became Tax Sale Resources in 2010, was taking this internal tool and making it available and really solving kind of the basic information that just wasn't available at the time. And that's how we got started, really, as a third-party servicer. And actually by 2012, we were doing so much of that business that we way outweighed what we were making from buying a few liens here and there.
Okay.
And so we gave up actually buying tax liens. So we didn't compete with our customers, which had become mostly institutional level customers, and really focused on the data software analytics service that we were providing for the space, and still do that component today. And so that kind of gets you up to speed mostly of where we're at today. I think the only real addition to that is in 2018, we knew we had, I'd say, most of the volume of tax liens that were purchased in the country were, the investors were using our services, right? And these are not that we had tens of thousands of customers. We just had probably 50 of the largest funds
Okay.
that were all using our service. And so there wasn't a whole lot of more potential capital in the tax lien side of it. And I'll come back to this whole tax lien versus tax deed here in a bit, Emma. But we did know that there were tens of thousands of users out there buying tax deeds, right? And these are real estate investors, essentially targeting a very, special segment of real estate. And we really had no adoption from those users. And so we started investigating why, right? And the answer that we got back almost 9 out of 10 times was, well, access to capital is their number one thing that they needed a solution for. And so our thought was, okay, well, let's just kind of take the lending tree approach. Let's go find a lender that's willing to lend against tax deeds. And if we can solve that, maybe we'll get the adoption from these, tens of thousands of users. So our goal was just really to marry the capital with the end user, right? And then hopefully get additional, revenue from the user base. And that's what really in 2018 we started on that path, got a bank all the way to really the signing or the finish line. Eventually, they said they couldn't because of SEC regulations, because the tax deeds are in a weird middle ground between real estate and real estate securities.
Yep.
And they kind of closed the door on the initial concept. And but I'm also a big believer in, one door closes and three windows open, pick one, jump out. And that's really where we sat down and said, well, we did all this work. Right? The bank liked it, loved the idea, right? And if they can't do it from a regulatory standpoint because they're a bank, then maybe there's a way that we could do it from a fund standpoint. And that's really how Mountain North Capital, which is kind of the other half of what we do today, that's when it was born. And really with the goal of providing capital to tax deed investors. And there's more to that story, which we can dive into, Emma. But between Mountain North Capital, which was started in 2020, and then Tax Sale Resources, which started back in 2010, obviously we're at 15 years since then, which is crazy to think how much time has gone by, but that gets you up to speed to where we're at today.
Yeah, and what I really like about the story, the two things that kind of jumped out at me. One, you had a rough time. You're going through, you're upside down on property, you're going to lose money. And most real estate investors, or especially new real estate investors, will freak out at that. I'm not good at this. I'm not cut out for this. It's too stressful. And I'm just going to keep losing more money if I keep doing this, that kind of defeatist attitude. But you saw that as something like somebody's making money off of me in this hard position. Like, how can I be on the other side? It's like when I was a real estate photographer and I would meet a landlord and I'd be like, "Hey, how did you get into this? How do you get properties?" All that. And I realized like I'm on the wrong side of the camera, right? Like I should be hiring real estate photographers, not being one. So that same kind of attitude. And I get that at closing tables a lot from title officers, where they're sitting there like, "Hey, so I sit across the table from a lot of people closing on these deals, but I always wonder like, how do I get on your side of the table?" Especially the women, because I'm a woman, and they'll ask me, and I think, "Yeah, you're on the wrong side of the table. Come over here." So you kind of realized you were on the wrong side of the table there. And then you realized a second thing that I think is really key is that you realize like not only what side of the table is this other person on and how do I get on that side, but it's also like where in this process do I fit?
Mhm.
Because like for me, I realized after trying a couple of these that I really like to come in for the value add component. I am happy to pay a wholesaler or tax lien specialist and then buy that wholesale from them. And I want to go do the fix up, right? And
Right.
I like that middle portion. I like putting the team together, finding all the resources. People tell you you should be happy to pay a contractor, but yet I find that people are not happy to pay somebody to go find a deal from them. But you realize that you were on the data side and on the money side, and that you were happiest, most successful, and that was the greatest leverage that you had. And so figuring out where you come along in the spectrum, it takes some trial and error. So
Mhm.
tell me about those two things, like turning a misfortune into an advantage and then also figuring out which step of the way you were blind because you're kind of more on the front end getting the data and even the front end with the financing and not doing the fix and flip or the sale or the rentals anymore at that point. You probably have a few, but I mean as a major business model.
Yeah, I think it's really, yeah, like I said, well, part of it is recognizing, what opportunities are there and where do you fit, right? And I can't say it's for me anyway, it wasn't really an active, well, I don't fit here, I'm gonna fit here. It was like
Mm,
where can I make money? Where are people willing to pay you to do things and where do I have the capacity, right? From a time perspective, right? Maybe financial capacity and maybe ability, right? To make these things happen. And I found, there's not a whole lot of people in this space with any sort of technology background, right? I was an aerospace engineer. I could write, basic websites. I could put all of my unique skills into basically an industry that, those weren't normal, right? It was
yeah.
full of PPAs. It was full of financial banking, folks, but not a whole lot of folks that could build software. That's
Mhm.
kind of how I found my niche, right? And it kind of comes back to, in chaos, which, it's 2007, 2008, is chaos. There's, you can either get rolled over by it or, my attitude then and still today, probably more so today, is like there's opportunities that come with that chaos if you can be savvy and finding where to take those opportunities. And so it was all right. Well, somebody's benefiting from this. How are they benefiting from this? Right. Can I benefit from it? And who knows how long the housing crash is going to last? I have no control over that. Definitely not then, not now. Right. So what can I do to participate in that downside? And so it was, yeah, being flexible, like you said, persistent, flexible, and just, keeping your eye open to where you might be able to fit. And and in my experience has been, if you can take some skill sets that aren't normal for a particular industry and then shape something that would be somewhat different for that industry, you put yourself in
Mhm.
a whole different category, and everyone else is kind of going, oh, that's new. That's cool. Right. And that's kind of what we had. We had a whole lot of institutional investors that had never really seen technology applied to what we're doing. And for me, it was normal and easy. Right. But for them, that's not the way they were wired. And so we had a pouring of customers to us because we were doing something new and different that they'd never seen before.
Yeah, and that really stands out with the, have you ever heard the phrase, like, "Be willing to do what other people aren't willing to do?" But then we think that that means we have to grind through and cry, but you found something that you were willing to do that was easy for you that other people didn't find that easy and other people weren't willing to do it. So when we say be willing to do what other people aren't willing to do, it doesn't mean that it has to be this horrible grind. It just means, like, what do you find what most other people hate that you might actually like? I've heard public speakers say this, like, people say they would rather get divorced or die than public speaking, like, that public speaking makes them more nervous than death and divorce. But if for the people who really like it, they're like, "That's an advantage because most people hate this, but I actually enjoy it." And so you're looking at it that way. So as a listener kinda considering, like, what is it that a lot of people hate to do that I'm like, "Ugh," either you don't mind or maybe you even like it. So, that's
Well,
a great way to look at it.
definitely don't go into something purely for the grind or believe that, being miserable for 20 years is going to get you ahead. Right.
Yeah.
I get, I'm sure you experience too, right? The grind is somewhat inevitable. So you might as well have some joy in it. Right. And doing something that you like to do.
Yep,
That's
80/20
why,
rule. Right.
yeah,
Well, my
yeah,
business coaches used to say this to me when I would bulk at cold calling. So you have to be willing to do things that other people aren't willing to. I was like, but I hate cold calling. So it doesn't have to be that thing. I can find
right.
something else other than, but I have a daughter who works in tech sales. She wants to dominate cold calling. She loves it. She wants to
Great.
learn everything possible. She wants to be like a cold calling manager of a sales team. She's like, I never want to move to warm. I just want to own this thing. And I'm like, girl, that's your superpower because most people, including myself, hate cold calling. So finding something like that yes, it's a grind. It's not like she loves going and cold calling every single day, but she's excited about growing this skill and becoming dominant in this thing that most other people can't stand. So I think that's just a
Cool.
lesson and a half right
Yeah.
there.
You nailed it. Like she will be enormously successful doing that because 99% of people don't want to cold call with a 10-foot pole. Right. But the fact that she,
Yeah.
maybe it's not the love of her life, right? But if she has excitement in doing it, she's in a very different category. And usually when you like something, you're going to excel at it, right? And so not only if you're doing something nobody else wants to do, she's going to excel at it, right? Puts her that much far ahead of anybody else, and that's a skill set that like we as entrepreneurs, we all need to some extent. So it's not something that is easily replaceable or easily found, quite frankly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you kind of did the same thing with data and tech. Like my husband used to be in IT for data science startups, and I interned there when I was getting my business degree. And I was in marketing. And so I was looking at that they were doing like data science and tech, like, wow. But for you, that was something that you were like, actually, I can do this. So you got into that side of things. You kind of found your niche superpower and moved from there. And so kind of describe to us what you're doing right now, because you mentioned that you have a fund that, we were talking about earlier that you can accept accredited investors who want to invest in something, but they don't want to do it themselves, where you're lending out to people who are purchasing the tax sales on one side. But you also mentioned that you have a lot of institutional users. So can you kind of walk through the silos that you have in your business? Who are you serving in each kind of specialty component that you have in there?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, Taxel resources as a service, right? And probably the primary question I get. And so I'll just come out and say up front, like we're not a coaching service, not a guru.
Okay.
Like we're not really out to teach folks how to
Yay,
do
no
the
coaching.
industry. Yeah. So, but what we are is, I'd say the resource for anybody that does want to do it seriously. And, I'd say get the coaching, get the education right somewhere. And there's some good ones. Be wary. There's some bad ones out there too.
Due
Um, you know,
diligence.
Yep. But once you know what you're doing, then we're one of the best resources to really do it successfully, right? So
Right.
answering all of the simple questions like when and where these auctions occur, right? What are the properties associated with them? Compile all of that information into a platform. Think of it like a Zillow for tax sales. So if you want to narrow it down to which ones make sense to buy and which ones don't make sense to buy, on your due diligence based on your criteria, that's what tax sale resources does. And that's really the institutional level, right? Or folks that want to buy tax liens themselves can use that tool, right, to be more successful. Think of it as a giant time saver because before we came along, you had to call the county, get the list, right? A lot of times it was faxed to you. Then you had to look up every parcel number in the county's assessor's website, and then you eventually get the spreadsheet of information. Now you can start filtering it. We do all that part up front. We do let's say the hard stuff so that you could just do the filtering and attend the sale and buy what makes sense or not. That's
Okay.
tax sale resources. And then on the other side, which is the Mountain North Capital, we really, I say, came up with a solution, solving that initial problem, which is providing capital for, real estate investors, initially taxi investors, but now it's like any fledgling, real estate investor that might be short on capital, but has a great model in mind. We kind of look at ourselves as kind of a venture capitalist for those real estate dreamers, if you will.
Yeah.
And we partnered with folks, I'll say across the country. We have about 35 different partners that we work with, and we're a capital partner, right? In the true sense that it's a profit share structure. And so
Mhm.
we are looking at it not we're not a lender. We're not just giving you money, right? And then if you fail, I'm going to come after, your assets, right? We are a partner in that we're going to jointly underwrite the assets, make sure the model makes sense. We're going to bring all the capital needed. We bring 100% of the capital needed.
Wow.
And as long as the financials make sense, then we both win, right? That's on the one side of the Mountain North Capital. On the other side, right, is it's a fund, right? It's a 506c fund. And so accredited investors that maybe are looking at this going, hey, that sounds pretty cool, but I don't want to do all the work, right? Then you can participate in the fund as well. And we said that to be evergreen. And so we can continue to grow. We're at about 47 million in assets now. We think there's plenty of room for growth, and so we have many years of doing that and growth potential ahead of us. And that's
Yeah.
really the kind of the three segments or three I'll say services that we're providing today.
Yeah, that is awesome. And now I know where to send people because we do a hard money lending fund. It's not solely hard money, but mostly hard money is our bread and butter. Bread and butter. And people will often ask me, like, where do I go to get private money? I'm like, friends, family, like, you gotta know someone. Like, we're hard money lenders. We charge 12%. We charge origination points. Like, that's how fix and flippers get things done. And we only do 70% of ARV, which to me seems pretty generous. But when I was first starting, people were asking me all the time, like, "Well, if I can get a 70% hard money loan, um, or a 100% hard money loan," I'm like, that's not a thing, right?
Yeah.
I know some people who are doing 100%, but that's 0 construction or something like that. There's nobody that's gonna do 100% of the acquisition and the construction, but people are always asking me where to find private money. So when you have a beginner like that who's like, "Oh, I don't know where to find private money," what kind of track record do they have to be to partner with you? Do you do any lending? Is it all equity? How does that work?
So there's not lending, right? So we're not a lender. I gotta make sure that regulators, anybody listening, like we don't lend anybody money. It's truly a profit share structure.
Right. So
In
all
that
equity.
yes, right, but it's not technically equity in the sense of like a traditional joint venture, right?
Mhm,
Basically, we have a profit share agreement that we put together. It basically says,
mhm.
hey, we're going to bring the capital to the table, right? And I'm not saying, hey, yeah, we're going to provide 100%. You can't game the system as in like using
Yeah.
the capital to go buy stuff, right? And it's like, hey, we'll provide the capital needed to purchase assets. We can provide 100% of that capital, right? We're going to go through jointly underwriting that asset, making sure the end goal is there, and then there's no monthly payments, right? But we don't get paid, including you partner don't get paid until this thing gets dispositioned, right? And whatever that disposition strategy is, and so it's unique in the fact that it's not based on a percentage of ARB. It's not, it's not any lending in general. It can be looked at as an expensive source of capital because it probably adds up to more than like 12 or 18% hard money, right? If you have that
Mhm.
capacity. But but we are a little more lenient in that, yes, you do have need some experience. You can't just come to us purely with an idea and say, I want to buy, multi-million dollar, multi-family properties. And then when we ask, well, how many have you done anything like this? No, I've never purchased a property before. Okay. That's not
Yeah.
where we're going to start. And so there's, but, I'd say dreamers in the fact that, have some real estate experience, trying to grow, limited in some way, right? Have a model that is limited by, traditional lenders, short-term rentals. There's starting to be more lenders out there for that. Or we worked with one guy, probably our, probably one of the most successful partners we work with. He'd done tons of residential, had never done commercial, was in a town, had a great relationship with the economic development administration there. Wanted to essentially, get him in and buying this commercial property at an incredible price, right? But he didn't have the $500,000, to buy that, right? And for that
Mhm.
property was outside, the cash, capabilities that he had. So we came in and partnered on the deal, provided the purchase price, right? And then 12 months later, it assessed at 2.7 million, right? So those are the type of scenarios where we can be an amazing partner. And that's the type of partnership that we're looking for.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, well, I think it's just important for new real estate investors to kind of understand if you find a private money partner who will loan you money at 10% with no points, like do whatever you need to keep that person.
Yes.
And
Happy, and yes, do as much as you can for
I feel
sure.
like debt is a whole lot cheaper than partners. And I think that that was made clear to me very on early on in my journey. But like you said, partners are a lot less risky because if you lose money, they lose money with you. You don't have to pay it back if you don't make it. And it also has those deferred payments. So for that flexibility up front, you're gonna give that partner a huge chunk of it on the back end. And so it's really important to consider which road you want to go down. Do you ever partner up when somebody already has a lender? So you're not a second lien loan, but you could have like say a hard money loan in place and then you'll come in for the equity portion?
No, we're everything we do is, I'll say, no debt, right? So
Got it.
we're not taking seconds. It's like, hey, we are the partner. You nailed it, right? It's like it's not the most inexpensive source of capital, right? It's a partnership, and it's probably going to end up costing more, but we have amazing flexibility, bridging asset classes that maybe you've never done before, or amounts that are in excess of what a particular lender would be comfortable with on an asset, but your model is doing something different with it, right? That's
Mhm.
where, the advantage comes. But we don't enter into any sort of like, hey, just the equity in a lender scenario. It's like, nope, we are your capital, right? And that way we ensure that, we're secured 100% along the way.
Yeah, that security on our end as the lender is so important, and it's a big part of how we are able to attract capital. So that's why I wanna to ask about that because a lot of the investors will be asking like, what? Because where are you in the capital stack? Are you the lender? Are you the second lien lender? Are you an equity partner? But you're basically doing away with the lender part of the capital stack. So you're having that ultimate security that a lender would have, a first lien lender would have, but at the same time having the balance of the project being able to be profit sharing. So you're almost able to benefit on that from from both sides, but also the real estate investor is benefiting because they're getting the project done and getting a piece of the pie for their work. And they're not putting much, if any, money into it. Or they could put a lot in. Does it depend like how much do you have equity partners? If they're going to put some of their own skin in the game, does that factor into the way you structure things?
It does, right? So, if they're really willing to put some up, we call it putting in an escrow. So it's not technically skin in that particular project, right? And it's more of, we
Mhm.
looked at it as a relationship centric, right?
Want it.
We don't look at it from one property to the next. It's like, hey, how many properties do you want to do? How much buying power do you want access to, right? 500K, a million, 2 million. And then, are they willing to put some money in like some skin in the game, right? In escrow, right? To make sure that they're not going to just go make a purchase and walk away, right? There's got to be something on there that they're on the hook for. But we're
Okay.
a replacement for both the think of it as the equity partner and the lender in that scenario, right? We are the capital source. You don't have to go find other equity, right? We are, your partner on that project. And ideally it's not just that asset, right? It's project, right? Multiple properties from start to finish.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a great way to look at it because I feel like understanding the way that the capital stack works is a weakness of a lot of new real estate investors, not just those who are going to do the active project, but also the limited partners are like, wait, the real estate never goes down. I can't possibly lose. I'm like, yeah, but there's a lender in front of you that's going to get paid because they don't quite understand how people get paid out when the project goes well. But it's really important to understand who gets paid out when the project does not go well. And so those both sides of that, it's really important. But I did also want to I kind of change gears a little bit, going back more into the tax side of things, because that's where your data really specializes. Can you tell us about that portion of your business? Because you mentioned the data and all of that. But for somebody who wants to go down that road, who either wants to be self-taught, find a coach wherever that is, and then come to you afterwards when they're ready to get down to business, would somebody get to the point where they even can use your tax sale? Like, can you give us a basic overview of even what that means? You mentioned a couple of different terms at the beginning. I'm not sure if I really understand the difference between it. So
Our
give us the 101 version.
Sure. Yeah. I think probably an interesting component of the tax sale space is you don't have to be, licensed. There's no real barrier to entry into buying a tax lien, right? From a, technical standpoint, right? Literally anybody with a social security number can go register on these different auction sites, right? Put a
Mhm.
deposit down and start buying. That doesn't mean that I would recommend doing that. And chances are you might get lucky on the first few, but I think one of the biggest misconceptions out there is that there's no way to lose, and there's many ways to lose
Yes.
in the space. And so definitely need to do your diligence before you start buying. And so, using our service is as simple as signing up and utilizing it, right? Participating in an auction is as simple as registering for the auction site and participating, right? You do have to have money to do that. But, right, let's maybe take one step back and talk a little bit about what the heck a tax lien and the tax deed are and what the difference and just when I'm talking about the space, like what the heck am I talking about? For those that are still probably have a giant question mark. I think what helps with that, Emma, is maybe explaining like the whole mechanism start to finish so that people understand what a tax lien versus a tax deed are or is. And so maybe I'll start at the beginning of the story with, most people pay their property taxes on time, right? I think 97% of people in the nation pay their property taxes on time and never even think twice of what happens if they don't pay their property taxes on time. And that's the way it should be, right? Is not many people end up here. But the really where our story starts is what happens if people don't pay their property taxes on time. Because the reality is most people pay their property taxes eventually, right? Very, very few never do, right? And then that's
Mhm.
something else. But what happens if you don't? Now, then that's really how tax liens, the first part of the story, comes into play. And I really got to go do some research to figure out exactly when tax liens are invented. But from an institutional investment standpoint, it didn't become a thing until the late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
And really what it is if one person doesn't pay their property taxes, not a big deal for the county. But in some counties, right, you have tens of thousands of people that haven't paid their property taxes on time. And some of the biggest issues, right, are like Cook County, which is Chicago, Illinois, New York City, right? You're talking hundreds of millions of dollars that are not paid on time. Now, the county or jurisdiction, they need that money, right, to pave the roads, pay the teachers, pay the policemen, firemen, right? That's they need to balance their budget. And so what they did is they use this tax lien structure to say, hey, third party investor, right? If you'll lend me some money, right, to balance my budget, the tax amount that was owed, I will put a lien on the property and I'll assign that lien to you, right? That's your collateral. And then if and when that property owner pays their taxes, and the vast majority do eventually, then whatever interest and penalties that I collect when they pay, I'm going to hand that over to you as the investor. That's how you make your money, and that can be a pretty significant percentage in most cases. And so that's what the tax lien purchasing is. You're buying a lien on the property. You have interest in the property. You don't own the asset at that point in time. You're earning an interest based on whatever the penalties are for people paying their taxes late, and you'll get that eventually when people pay. Now, that's the hard part is you don't know when that exactly is going to happen, right? So it
Well,
might be
yeah.
10, 15, sometimes 18% that you're earning, but that could be, month 3, that could be month 24. You don't really
Mhm.
know exactly when that's going to happen. That is a downside of that space. So that's the first half of the story of the tax lien. Now, I try to compare tax liens to like a micro mortgage because the mechanism is very similar. And so that small percentage of people that never pay their property taxes, what happens then? And that's where the second half of the story comes in is if they don't, right, the lien holder, the investor that bought the tax lien, they can start a foreclosure process just like a mortgage, holder. If you don't pay your mortgage, that starts a foreclosure process, and that can culminate in the sale of the property. Now the investors at those auctions are buying a deed to the property. Those are tax deeds. No longer interest in the property, right? You're buying that property. You're going to do something with that asset. And so
Right.
you're a real estate investor, like any other real estate investor, you're just buying a very different segment of real estate compared to the MLS. Like these are not on MLS, right? These are uh, off market, type of assets. And that's really the difference between tax liens and tax deeds. Now there's
Okay.
a middle ground in there I call redeemable deeds, and there's a few states that fall into that middle ground. But without getting too messy in the nuances between them, that those are kind of the two major buckets. And taxable resources covers both of those
Okay.
types of assets.
Okay. Yeah. That so one is almost like you're a like a collections agency. Is this the analogy that we're looking for on the lien
Um,
side where you're
well,
buying the paper of what they owe?
no, I think it's better to think of it as because you're never communicating with the property owner, right? That's all done by the county. So the county is
Okay.
really the collecting agency. You are the lender, right, in a mortgage scenario where you never talk to your lender, rarely, right? You're talking to the servicer, doing it.
Yeah.
So think of the county as the servicer that you're talking to. The lender in the background that provided the money in the first place, that's your place as the tax lien holder.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense because that's more similar actually to some of the things that we've done. And then when you're buying the tax deed, is that kind of like the auction steps that you're talking about where you buy an actual piece of property? So one, you're trading in paper and the other you're trading in physical real
You got it.
assets.
Yeah. Tax liens, you're
Okay.
trading in paper. Tax deed, you're trading in actual real estate.
Okay. And this is why it's so important to understand what a lien is. Like most of us, if we are homeowners, we get it. Like our HOA can put a lien if we don't pay our dues. The county can put a lien if we're not paying our taxes. Contractors can put a lien if they've done work and we haven't paid them if they've correctly filed their paperwork on the front end, which I think is a huge problem with general contractors is they don't know how to file notice of lien on in the originally and depending on what state they're in. So we've had some of our contractor friends run into that where they didn't get paid, but then they can't put a lien on the property because they did not follow those procedures. But I feel like as long as there are liens on the property when the property is sold, those have to be paid out first. So you can have a first lien from a lender, which is what we do. You can have a second lien on a lender, second mortgage. And so understanding the lien structure and who gets paid first when a property gets sold is really important to be understanding where you fall in line with the tax lien, what other liens are on it, and doing that kind of research and dealing in that paper title side of things. It's like, hey, it's like an IOU, and where you are in line determines where you get paid. Okay,
Well,
perfect. And then the
that's
other
one of
one,
the advantages, like when you say where you're at in line, like tax liens in all but one state, you're first in line, right? You're ahead of the mortgage holder. You're ahead of anybody else that has a lien. So you're going to be paid first, right?
yes,
Which is a big advantage.
yeah. Well, and then there's also the excess proceeds I've seen a lot of times where a house will be sold for more than the tax lien is worth, but especially if there's no lender to get paid and that's the only lien or everybody gets paid off and there's excess money, the county will hold that. And some investors will even go after the excess proceeds. They usually get donated to the school district if it's been
Mm,
sitting for long enough. But sometimes you can go and have the person because the person who had the house sold is supposed to be able to go and claim those excess proceeds for themselves, but a lot of time they
right.
don't know it's there. So an investor will come and say, "Hey, you have this money sitting at the county that you can go get. How about I give you this cash right now and I'll go to court and get it back for you." And I think that that is pretty risky. And I know people do that. They kind of get burned in court a lot of times, but I think it can be very effective, especially your first few times doing it. I don't know if you can make a career out of it, but
I've
that's
heard
another
of
thing.
people
Yeah.
being successful.
Yeah.
I've heard of it, right? I
Yeah.
don't
What
know if
what
there's
happens
any.
to the money when the taxes are paid and there's money sitting left over is the excess proceeds. And so I feel like there are so many opportunities at each spot along this. So I appreciate you explaining that to us and people who want to get into this. I love what you're doing at Mount North Capital because I feel like that is something that is so needed in the space. I don't know how many competitors are doing that, but I've never really heard of this before. And so I'm hoping that our listeners and me myself, my brain's like spinning now about how I could make use of something like that on some projects I'm looking at. So very, very cool stuff that you're working on data side, on the capital financing side, and you've really plugged some holes of where people are really struggling. And you've been doing it a really long time too, which I love. You've been through a couple, 2008 downturn, whatever this weird recession downturn is that we're going through
What
right now, and you've really been seeing some
moment of
cycles. So that's
chaos, right? Remember that
right.
opportunity comes with chaos? Yeah, that we're
Exactly.
and whatever you wanna call what we're in right now, I think it's a moment of chaos to some degree, right?
Exactly. And it doesn't hurt that you're also a rocket scientist. Give some credibility to the
Well,
aerospace
used to be,
engineers.
I'd say I never really considered myself, in that level of category. There's some really smart people. I just happen to have a degree and could talk to some really smart people and got to put together, life-size, Legos is, the nerd in me, and anyway.
Yeah. My daughter's a mechanical engineer. She just graduated. She's totally having imposter syndrome. So I know what you're talking about. Cause most people I know who, especially when they've gotten out of the space are like, well, I don't know. My partner was a civil engineer and I'd make jokes like, you're the math one. She's like, I don't remember any of it. Like you have to do the math.
Yes.
So,
Anymore, it's, my
you-
daughter, secondary math, I'm still busting out my calculator to do those large multiples.
well, my dad was a high school math teacher before I was born. And so by the time I got to high school, he was like, hold on a second. So it happens to all of us, but
Oh, yeah.
um, and so just kind of wrap us up with your own future. Like I said, I love when the guests can kind of get talking about their own passive income adventure that you're working on, because I feel like when you get to the point where you maybe could retire financially with a certain lifestyle, or you're compounding where you're spending less than is compounding, you're like, hey, what do I do with the rest of my life? How do I keep myself busy? How do I keep myself contributing? Or how do I relax? Like whatever that looks like what is your own passive income adventure journey look like for you over the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
Ooh, that's a great question, Emma. I'm one that I love now, right? When I finally shifted and made the leap into going into business on my own and don't have a 9 to 5 job. I've shifted to where I probably work more now, but I love going into the office every day. I love the big juicy problems are really what I seem to have been made for this planet to try and figure out a solution for, and we certainly find ourselves in big juicy problems regularly,
Yep.
because I also have a version of ADD where it's like, okay, I've tackled that, let's go find the next big juicy problem. And so I don't know that I see much difference, right, in from what I'm doing today versus 5 years from now. My journey is a little bit further along in the fact that I guess I don't have a normal 9 to 5. This is now a chosen, thing for me. Not to say that I could step away and go do anything for more than, a week, it seems like. That's one
Mhm.
big downside. And so if there was any piece of it that I'm working myself out of a job, right, is like how to ensure that I can take time, to do longer things and do more with my family, which is probably a reason why we haven't grown as fast as maybe we could have, is because I've made that a priority, right? It's like there's only so much time that's spent on the business, in the business, and then there's a carved out time that's spent with the family, making sure that I'm there in their lives and that we get to do those sorts of things. And so I'm not, this 67-year-old with a ton of money, right? But looking back, going, I wish I'd have done that different. I wish I would have done that different. I like to think that I've had more balance. But if I can get to where I could, right, theoretically take longer vacations and not feel like this anxiety of the dings on my phone and the emails racking up,
Mhm.
and be okay because I know somebody else has got it covered. 5 years from now, I could have that easy feeling when those dings are going off. That would be a win in my book, Emma.
Yeah. Yeah. Being able to take longer vacations with systems and processes and human resources in place where you're like, oh, I got this. And I interviewed somebody on the show, I don't know, maybe last year, and he was talking about this business that he had going, and where he said we basically do nothing in that business anymore. But he's on because now he has a business doing something much more active. And so he has the one that's fairly hands off. Took him 10 years to get to that point. And then what did he do? He just went and started another business. He's like, I just love it. I just love it.
Yeah.
I could quit tomorrow and I don't want to. But he has a lot of flexibility because the second business that he built had more flexibility that he could be away for longer. And so that those kinds of lifestyle questions I think are really important to ask the viewer and the listener needs to be asking. It's like, where is this going? If people are afraid of failure, but I find that people oftentimes don't think about the cost of success and making sure that the path that they're on aligns with what they're looking for. And so, yeah, I always love to ask my guests what your own journey looks like as far as that goes. Oh, I appreciate you sharing.
That's an excellent question. Made me rethink life over the next 5 years. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I always wind up the episode, and I think that you've kind of addressed this pretty thoroughly. But just if there's anything else that you need to know, like the person that you want to reach out to after the show, can you invite who it is that you can really help that you would like to talk to afterwards?
Well, I guess, selfishly on the fun side, if you are an accredited investor looking for, good cash flow on a month, actually it's quarterly basis, right? But don't necessarily want to dive in and do all the work, certainly, want to, speak to those folks. On the flip side, anybody that is, has really cool real estate models that they want to pursue, maybe don't have the funding mechanism in place and are looking for, like capital partner, again, would love to talk to those folks on the other side of Mount Hard Capital. And then if you are wanting to dive into tax liens or deeds, right, and you want to do it all and you just need the resource to find this stuff, then you'll certainly check out taxsaleresources.com. So anybody that fits any of those molds, would love to continue the conversation.
Yeah, and this show, even though I try to get into the nitty-gritty. It's not really enough to somebody take this information and say, "Oh, now I'm ready to go start this business." There's more after that. Whether you want to invest as an LP or you want to go run your own business, whatever it is, there's a lot more learning. We just want to expose you to the idea so that you could say like, "Hey, actually, I really resonate with that," because that's how I got to where I was in real estate, going to hearing lots of different people speak, listening to podcasts, going to my local real estate clubs, and then hearing them speak and then checking in with myself and being like, do I really want to? No, this isn't good fit for me. Versus my eyes lighting up like, wait a second, I think I could actually do that. And so, if that describes you, if anything we have said here today is something that you want to learn more about, like, please reach out to us. That's like why we put the show on, is so that you can get in touch with us. And so, Brian, you can get a hold of him at taxsaleresources.com. And then you can get a hold of me at investwithemma.com. And I can hook you up with any of the guests we've had previously on the show and make sure that you are going down the path that you want to be going down, and that you fully understand kind of what this could possibly lead to if you hit success, understanding that you're probably going to have a few pivots along the way like both Brian and I did. So thanks so much, Brian, for coming on the show and educating us about tax sales, about real estate investing, about funds, all that. I think that it was really beneficial for the listener because this isn't really something we've talked about on the show before. So appreciate it.
Well, Emma, thanks again for having me. This was fun. Maybe we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, definitely. You've been around the block and have a lot of stories, and that's what this show does best, or diving into that story side. So appreciate you listening, and I will catch you next week when we bring you some more passive income adventures.